We're back into discussing the President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's administration's performance in the last year, its actions, inactions, and policies with, of course, some of our very, very fantastic in-studio guests ranging from political and current affairs analysts, opposition party representatives, and a former NBA chairman. Of course, for those just joining us, I am Usaugi Ogbawa, and I have with me
Olive Emodi. It's always a delight to be here. Today we're joined by the students from the National Institute of Journalism who are seated here in the studio with us. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for being a part of the show today. Before I get you to, speak about being here, we're also joined by political analysts. It's not a new face, Dayo Akintobi. Good morning and happy former Democracy Day.
Good morning and happy Inauguration Day anniversary.
Exactly, of course, that's the anniversary. But now we have our students from the National Institute of Journalism. Thank you very much for being a part of our show today. I think the quickest way to gauge your reaction or your expectation for the next 1 year would be to ask about your reflection from the past 1 year. Would you say that you're pleased by the administration so far?
Well, out there on the streets, which is what matters,
exactly,
as opposed to professional pundits like us, the general feeling among the populace is that of malaise, is that of disappointment, disillusionment. A year ago, they were promised renewed hope, and today what they're seeing is dashed hopes. And it gives a lot of consternation for the next 3 years in terms of if it's more of the same to expect in the next 3 years as what we've had in the first 1 year, then there is no hope at all.
But just before we go back to our guests, are Nigerians asking for too much? Are they having, expectations that aren't realistic?
No, absolutely not. I mean, I think it's among the UN Charter of Human Rights that everyone has a right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And that begins with the basics, what gives for a decent quality of life, affordable housing, employment, the fact that you have enough money in your pocket to eat 3 square meals a day, affordable transportation, fuel, you can pay your rent. The basics, nobody's asking for any luxuries at this point. Nigerians just want to have a average quality of life, and this government is falling short of delivering that.
All right, there's something that Osage said earlier that I think would be a great question for you to answer. Would you say it's a function of the current administration being underprepared or overwhelmed?
Well, that would be a shocker because this particular president planned strategically his ascension to office and took several years to prepare for it. So to now say that he's unprepared or he's caught with his pants down after he gets into office, well, yes, when you're on the outside looking in, you can make plans and set out roadmaps, and then you get in and the reality is a lot different. For example, they say, well, the previous administration left the country in doldrums, and we've had a lot more to grapple with than we anticipated. But as the president has said, he asked for this job. Don't feel sorry for him. He feels like he has what it takes to improve the lot of Nigerians, but so far we're not seeing it. Of course, the administration is saying, well, what we met on ground has made it difficult, and we're laying a foundation that reform takes time to do. And what we're doing is putting in place measures that will begin to reap the benefits from down the road. Nigerians on average now are saying, the president promises that he knows what he's doing, but it looks like he does not know what he's doing, but the jury is still out. We will know whether he knows what he's doing down the road, and the beauty of democracy is that we get to score him every 4 years.
Not a lot of lives and businesses, may survive
to score him when the time is right.
And another thing is the former President Muhammadu Buhari contested many times, so you'd expect that he actually had a plan.
Absolutely.
When he gets into office. Unfortunately, that wasn't what we found. Right. Olive?
Okay, let's get into the meat of the conversation. We'll come back to talk to our in-house guest from the National Institute of Journalism, but let's get to talk to Mr. Akintobi. Currently, I think we should break it down by looking at the 8-point agenda that the current administration promised us, the Renewed Hope administration. And the 8-point agenda include food security, poverty eradication, economic growth and job creation, access to capital, inclusivity for youth and women, improving security, promoting fair play among businesses and strengthening the rule of law, and fighting corruption. Maybe we'll try to see how many we can take. But of the 8-point agenda, which would you say they have performed the best in? Which would you say they've made considerable progress in the past 1 year?
I like the access to capital one, because when you look at it, the recently launched National Education Loan Fund, NEL Fund, where student loans are made available to all Nigerian students who want to get an education but are financially constrained. So I think that's a good one. There's also access to consumer credit. They've done this consumer credit thing recently that people are able to borrow to fund various aspects of their lives. They've also provided credit to MSMEs, micro and small and medium businesses, to where they've been able to have access to credits. Also, there have been agricultural credits. There have been different initiatives that have been put forward to create capital. So I think that's a plus for this government.
All right. Let's now take the conversation to the ministers and analyzing the work that the ministers have done. The ministerial review has been going on. And as we mark the first year of President Tinubu-led administration, we'll begin by putting our spotlight on Tinubu's performing ministers. Recall that these ministers have spent the last few days defending their performance in the last year. So we'll take a look at their performances. But first, let's take a look at this video.
We put about 200 billion. We asked for 200 billion for exploration, and that is data gathering. But because of the paucity of funds generally across board, we couldn't get anything anywhere near that at all. So, in our own lexicology, there is nothing like impossibility. So we put our own creative endeavor into motion, and we are adopting other strategies to secure funding, one of which is a PPP arrangement.
Suspended. It was never Air Nigeria. It was Ethiopian Air trying to flag our flag. It was not Air Nigeria. That is the truth. There was not in Air Nigeria. It was only painted Air Nigeria. It was Ethiopian airline trying to fly our flag. If it is so, why not allow our local people to fly our flag? Why bring the foreigner to fly our flag? So nobody should deceive that it was Air Nigeria. Air Nigeria must be indigenous, must be wholly Nigeria, or must be for the full benefits of Nigeria. Not that 60% of the profit was another country. How does that benefit us? How? It remains suspended. It remains so.
The ministers of FCT, Youth Development, and Still Development first gave their scorecard.
The FCT administration was assigned presidential priorities 5 and 6 out of the 9 high-impact deliverables. Were assigned 5 and 6. Priority 5 has to do with enhanced infrastructure and transportation as enablers of growth. And in this case, you talk about accelerate the execution of all ongoing projects, fast-track the completion of various road and infrastructure projects.
And there you have it. The ministers have, of course, been delivering their scorecard for the past 9 months. And that was, of course, the minister of the FCT. He's a former, I think I still remember to call him sometimes His Excellency Nyesom Wike. I don't think he ever completely leaves. But judging from what he said, Nyesom Wike has come under a lot of criticism, based on his involvement in Rivers State. And now he's been applauded for having worked hard. Before we get to Nyesom Wike, I'll ask you directly, who are your best performing ministers? Who are your worst performing ministers?
Well, in the whole complement of the federal cabinet, I think there's just a handful that we can say are performing. And of course, it's reflected in the outcome of our daily lives. We don't see major improvements, which means a lot of the ministers are underperforming because they actually are the ones who carry out the president's mandate. I would say no more than probably Interior, Works, FCT, perhaps Mines, and Aviation. I think those are the only ones that could get barely a pass mark. When you look at blue economy, you look at finance, you look at a whole slew of them, and you sometimes don't even, there's some we haven't even heard from in the entire 1 year. We don't even know they exist.
But the thing is, like some of them that you've mentioned now, the Interior, the FCT minister, and the likes, is our idea of a performing minister flawed? In the sense that are we rating these people's performances based on what Nigerians are used to in the past, where ministers just exist? Or are we rating their performances based on what we can actually see that they're doing that is bringing value? Because I'm not sure why the FCT minister is being rated. Is he minister of the FCT?
Well, he's been called Mr. Projects. Apparently, while he was in Rivers, he built a lot of flyovers and a lot of roads, and he's replicating that in Abuja. The president commissioned a number of projects yesterday that have been implemented and completed under the new minister's watch. However, I think Nigerians have become inured to mediocrity. And so when we have a very tiny amount of achievement, it looks gargantuan to us simply because we're used to underperformance. But there are deliverables that are measurable. Look at interior, passports, applications for passports, and the time for processing have been remarkably reduced. I was at the international airport yesterday, seeing of someone going to the UK, and he just scanned his passport and the electronic doors opened. In the past, you'd have to queue up for a human being from the immigration, then you go to DSS and you go to customs, and each of them is taking you through a slew of interrogatories. But now it's electronic, and so the passage through the airport was seamless and timely. And that, to me, is a fundamental achievement. That is a global best practice. It's not really a big deal internationally. But here in this country, where we're used to convoluted, difficult, extraneous ways of doing the simplest things, then you have to applaud the little progresses.
Yes, unfortunately.
I mean, there are a number of names that have jumped out as well. But like you said, there are a number of ministers that we haven't heard about ever since, they're swearing in. But let's invite our students just to ask, I mean, are there any ministers that you admire or you've heard about that you think, that they've done well? Whilst you're thinking about that, also just to ask you, I think the same question I asked you earlier before the mic went out. How would you say you felt about the past 1 year? Is anyone here willing to speak? Yes, talk to us about how you felt this past 1 year.
My name is Precious Wando. Okay, I have felt for the past 1 year about the Tinubu's regime. I'm going to say I haven't felt so good about it, because if we look at the 8-point agenda that was set by his regime, which is the renewed hope, they tagged the renewed hope, we would see that the things they set, the points they've set, haven't been achieved. And as a matter of fact, instead it's going down. Take some of the points, for example, eradicating poverty, food growth, security. We'll see that in all of this, there has been a lot of loopholes into those sectors, into the point they said they were going to achieve. So I'm going to say I have not been impressed for the past 1 year about the Tinubu's regime.
All right, thank you very much. She says she's not been impressed with President Tinubu's administration.
Is anybody here who's been, who has a different opinion?
Is there anyone who's impressed? Yeah, I think that's a good one. Anyone here who's impressed that would like to speak? Or there's something you're impressed about so far? Or impressed with?
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Emmanuel Ashimeragwa. I think the right word to use would not be impressed, because while a lot of Nigerians might be frustrated and disappointed by how the presidents have run the affairs of the nation, we also need to remind ourselves that they are inheriting a lot of backlogs from the previous administration. And of course, there are some policies that have been implemented which would look like the benefits of those policies would begin to materialize later down the road or in coming years. So it is true that the current administration could have done better within the last 365 days, but also need to remind ourselves that good things take time to happen.
Thank you very much, Emmanuel, for that. Emmanuel has said, of course, and this is a logic that we've heard from a number of people, that what we're experiencing now was inherited from the past administration, even though the counter-argument we usually hear to that is that President Bola Ahmed Tinubu did say that he was building from where President Muhammadu Buhari stopped. So Emmanuel has said good things take time. How much more time before we start to see an improvement? How much more time before we start to see that some of these policies start to kick in, the positive effect of these policies kick in?
Well, human beings in general, we are rather impatient, and we, especially particularly Nigerians, we want overnight, instant gratification, and there's a tendency to want miracles to happen overnight, but a simple analogy is to look at how long it takes to build a house and how quickly you can demolish one. It takes time to put the building blocks in place. Now, what I hold on to is the president's continued assurance that he knows what he is doing, and that as a former governor, as an administrator, as an accountant, he is fully in charge, and he's confident that the reforms he's putting in place will ultimately yield good gains. Does he know what he's doing? You don't know, I don't know. The proof of the pudding is in the eating.
Yeah.
We will discover down the road. Unfortunately, as your colleague said, how many of us will be alive, well, and kicking long enough to be able to witness the manifestation of those reforms if they're time consuming and they don't come immediately? Nigerians want the change today. In fact, we're not willing to wait the 1 year.
You can't blame the average Nigerian, after what they've experienced in the last, on the average 10.
Well, especially when you
15
consider the
years.
fact that a year ago today, the president made a statement that sent us on a downward spiral.
Yes.
I mean, from that, we peg everything to that inaugural speech in which he made two major policy decisions that completely changed our well-being and our fortunes. And up to today, we're still grappling with the effects of those two policy changes. So he promised us then that they were necessary and that we'd have to go and endure some pains, but we've had enough already. We've had enough already, and we think, okay, we've given you a year. You did this unceremoniously. You did it without any pre-warning and without putting in certain steps that would cushion the effects. And you told us to trust you. And we did for a year. And we didn't expect that we'd go through dire straits for this long, really.
All right, hold on. Let's just quickly share, quick graphics on the notable achievements of Mr. President in the last 1 year. Of course, food security and agriculture, the intervention programs to help cushion the negative impacts of the reforms. 2023 in August, the federal government launched a 180 billion naira palliative package to states to cushion the impact of fuel subsidy removal. That did come with a lot of criticism. It was called a waste of money. July 2023, and of course, they suspended the distribution of 8,000 naira to 12 million households, a reversal of one of their policies. August 2023, of course, 5 trucks of rice were released each to 36 state governors. And the state governors, of course, were to procure 100,000 bags of rice, 40,000 bags of maize, fertilizers, and others to cushion food price hike. None of these policies also seem to have improved on Nigeria's agricultural sector or even helped starving families a lot. The president also removed fuel subsidy, unified the multiple foreign exchange market. The government set up a tax and fiscal reforms committee. Of course, Interior Ministry, like you mentioned, automated passport application process, and an infrastructure initiating construction of the Lagos Coastal Road project, which obviously has come with its own bits of criticism. And so there's almost nothing that the government has implemented in the last 1 year that hasn't come with bits of chaos, and criticism from, Nigerians.
Right. And then they, of course, have secured funding for major seaport, railroad, and power. And, of course, that's in addition to the work that they've done regarding infrastructure. Now, moving on to education, activating a student loan scheme, which has also come with some measure of criticism. And now the judiciary increased remuneration for judges. We did hear very recently where the Chief Justice is saying that it was imperative that we increase the remuneration of the judges because that would impact the quality of judgments being delivered. Governance, they signed a new Electricity Act allowing states and players, private players in the power sector. Foreign policy, position Nigeria as a stabilizing force in ECOWAS, boosted FDI inflows over $15 billion, and enforced bilateral air routes for Nigerian airlines. And finally, in oil and gas, rehabilitating refineries and incentivizing new private refineries. As quickly as you can. You've seen all of these achievements so far. Which would you say has been the most impactful?
Many of these seem to be audio reforms because they look good, they sound good, but we're not feeling their impacts at ground zero level. I look at it and I think, well, I've already mentioned, I think the education sector, the fact that they're providing money and expanding the net of Nigerians who are able to now fund their education. Because that has always been the key thing is the ability to afford to go to school. So they're now making it possible, even though I saw somewhere yesterday someone saying you're enslaving Nigerians, you're mortgaging their future by putting them in debt before they even get into the workforce. But every policy will always have its adherents and its critiques. So what really matters is the actual measurable impact on the lives of those it is directed to. I wasn't too impressed with the issue of palliatives. I don't think we should be a palliative economy, because a palliative is a short-term, temporary relief. It doesn't bring about a long-term solution. So when you reeled out all the rice and maize and supports and cash transfers and things like that, I'm not impressed by those, really. I prefer an initiative or a set of initiatives that seek to empower citizens long-term: education, healthcare, employment, affordable
housing and all the likes. I mean, it's better to equip one with the tools to fish than always just continually giving them fish so they stay dependent on you. Dayo Adetobi, it's always a delight to have you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
All right, the conversation still continues here on Breakfast Central. We are still, of course, reviewing the past year of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, looking at the reforms that have been made so far. We have another guest coming in right after this break.
Welcome once again. Under President Bola Tinubu's administration, Nigerian politics has been marked by a mix of reforms and controversies. On the one hand, the administration has implemented significant economic reforms aimed at diversifying the country's revenue streams. However, Tinubu's presidency has also been criticized for its handling of political opposition, political interference, and accusations of nepotism.
Several political controversies have come up in the last 1 year. For example, many Nigerians still question the criteria for selecting some of the administration's ministers. Other noteworthy controversial events include the lack of proper procedure in awarding the construction of the Lagos-Calabar Highway project, Seyi Tinubu's alliance with CDK Integrated Company, the company awarded this project, the president's interference in the Wike and Fubara dispute, as well as the federal government's involvement in the recent Kano crisis. Joining us this morning to discuss these issues and more is lawyer and political analyst Dele Farotimi. Good morning, and thank you very much for joining us.
Good morning. Thank
you.
So
I think the flat question, of course, would be how you would rate this, or how you will score this administration in its political alliances, you know, looking at how transparent and accountable this administration has been.
Wow. I'm left stunned simply because of all the things to be discussing today. The last thing I expected to talk about would be the predictable outcome of the fait accompli that has been foisted on all of us. There is nothing that is happening today that wasn't clearly predicted or predictable. I'm not even sure that any student of contemporary history can validly claim to be surprised by any of the many questions that you've just asked, and even the ones that are not asked but are equally embedded in the question that has been asked. That we have a 4 billion per kilometer road that smells of every corruption imaginable under the sun cannot possibly be a surprise to anyone who understands the antecedent of the government in power. And frankly speaking, I'm not even sure that it is worthy of discourse, because I think there is an Arabian proverb. It says, you can hardly complain about having fleas underneath your armpit if you've gone to bed with your dog. So you will please excuse me, I would rather not be drawn into. I remember very clearly, at least a year before the election, I made clear what I believe to be the stark realities facing the Nigerian people. I remember a phrase I used at the time when I described the current occupant of the Nigerian presidency as one of two horsemen of the apocalypse. And I do recall that I made singularly clear that the constitutional order had come to an end when the Supreme Court validated what was obviously a national rape of our democratic sovereignty, if I may use those words. So to now sit down here a year later is the one that we are seeing in the public space that we are discussing, or at least I'm being asked to discuss. The reality of the matter is that corruption is not a Nigerian word. What is spectacularly Nigerian, which made somebody define us as being fantastically corrupt, is the sickening impunity. There are multiple legislations that are being trampled on a daily basis, but what is it that we want to be now? I think until we are serious about having a country governed by law, then what you are asking me to discuss are merely fruits of a sickening tree that we are all ignoring whilst we are bemoaning.
Yeah, just to be clear, I saw that you had posted a few days ago, about a week ago, I thank God for Tinubu. Was that maybe, because you were excited about how, great Nigeria was becoming under his leadership?
I have never been circumspect about stating exactly what my purpose is in the Nigerian space. I've made it clear, abundantly clear, multiple times. I don't believe, it's not about person. The only reason why Tinubu becomes important within the context of that phrase, I thank God for Tinubu, is because he has accelerated time. What he has done is that he has offered clarity where there used to be a whole lot of opaqueness. It used to be that it was very easy for some people to disguise just how accommodating they are of evil. It used to be pretty difficult, They hide behind a lot of platitudes. They spiritualized carnal evil that is there in broad daylight for all to see. In the name of God, a lot of them preached. And then because of Tinubu, it became very possible for people to come out into the public space and embrace what we all know to be evil. So because of him, it has become less challenging to explain it's become less challenging to explain the extent of the rot that has set into our system. The judiciary also began to unveil itself and uncloak itself in the public space in pursuit of the validation of what we all could see very clearly. And because of him as well, it's become obvious to me that there is a coalition of Nigerians disadvantaged that is actually larger than those who wishes to preserve the status quo. So there are so many reasons why it is actually right to thank Tinubu. It's not just Tinubu as a person. It is everything that led to his emergence, the ease with which it became possible to speak to the dividing lines in public morality. It became very easy just on account of him.
Still speaking of thanking Tinubu, do you think that Rivers State should thank him for the role that he played in the crisis, the peace accord that turned out to be not so peaceful? And do you think that Kano State should maybe expect, because there have been calls for the president to intervene in the crisis happening in the seat of Kano State?
Yorubas are very funny people. We are very, very funny. They say, More Molagege, Ajawole Sorosho. That means I've seen an abomination in broad daylight, right? Abominations have become normal in our country. So, Wike and his son are quarreling. And then they all had to go inside the rock to go and meet Oga Kwata. It's meant to be a federal government, right? So what's the substance of this quarrel? Were they quarreling over whether they should have an aggressive tax system that takes money from the rich in Rivers State in order to provide a whole lot of goodies for the people of Rivers State? No. The only thing you've ever heard is that one is overbearing and is demanding much more than it should be taken from the coffers, the people's purse. And these people now took themselves all the way to Abuja to go and report to Oga. See, for me, these quarrels are merely squabbles amongst thieves. The victims are the people who are meant to be the citizens. The squabble that is taking place in Kano, the Kano comedy that we're watching as well, how has it changed the price of momo in Kano market for the Talakawas in Kano? It's just a squabble amongst, privileged Nigerians who do not actually exist in the same circle as the common man on the street. So for me, all these are mere distractions. If anything, all I take from it is the ruling class has become so comfortable that it does not even mind bringing its putrid mess into the public space because it has grown contemptuous of the people. It knows what the people does not know, that we are not a democracy. The system also knows that the people are not citizens. It knows, because if that were not to be the case, there should be some level of shamefulness governing affairs to the point where even when they are having these shameful squabbles, they should keep it away from the public sight. But they do it right there out in the open. Court orders will be flying left, right, and center. You file a case in court and you might be there for 5 years before your case ever comes before a judge. But when they are the ones having their squabbles, you'll be seeing court judgments flying from all kinds of corners within hours of each other. It tells you that the entire system itself is gone.
There's obviously a reason, from the boldness that you've described, the fact that they are now bolder to put these things out in public, to have these squabbles in public, to embarrass themselves, embarrass our democracy, embarrass our constitution.
You don't have a democracy. You don't have a constitution.
What we call a democracy and a constitution. It's maybe also because of the nature of the average Nigerian, to see these things happen and, just live their lives like it is normal.
You see, unfortunately, we're looking at the result of concerted efforts by the state over years to turn Nigerians into what we have largely become today. When you have a situation where the state itself is the administrator of weaponized ignorance, it deliberately weaponized ignorance, deliberately weaponized poverty, and then religion is used as a tool of stupefaction, where the people ignore to use their God-given brain, but are happy to accept the diktats of religious rulers who tell them that other one who belongs to the other Abrahamic religion is your enemy. That one, because it belongs to your faith, is your brother. He can do no wrong. So we do not assess issues based on the use of our God-given intellect. We are reacting after the weaponized poverty and ignorance and the diktat of religious rulers. We ignore the use of our brain and we just assume.
Yeah, so what then is the use? I mean, if this is, what we've seen as the nature of the average Nigerian, large, percentage of Nigerians, this is how we are. Brainwashed, like you've described, already being fooled by religion and by tribe and these other, different levels of distraction. Why then do you bother?
Because at the end of the day, it has never taken a majority to change society. It has always ever been about a critical mass. It's never ever been about a majority. The majority has always been happy with conventional situations. They're happy with peace. If you even recall, for those of you who are Christians, you recall the bit where multiple times the children of Israel were demanding to be taken back into Egypt. They were comfortable with slavery. That was all they knew.
Yes.
Even if you took that metaphorically, the truth of the matter is that they were comfortable
In slavery.
in slavery. It was their living reality for generations. The uncertainty of freedom sometimes make it very attractive for the slave to begin to polish his chains as though they are adornments. But I keep believing that when the time comes that we have built a critical mass of Nigerians who says no to this nauseating reality, then it becomes possible to change things.
Okay, let's talk about the role that the judiciary plays in all of this. We've seen the judiciary had come under attack, especially after the 2023 general elections. In Kano State, for example, we've seen the conflicting orders that have come out in the past few days. You know, one from the allegedly from the United States of America that has brought up the conversation about jurisdiction, practicing or giving another outside jurisdiction. There are conflicting issues that have come up in the past few days. So talk to us about the role that the judiciary has played in this current administration so far in the past 1 year. How would you rate or assess the judiciary's involvement in whatever form of democracy we have today?
See, the bedrock of any modern state that aspires to a democracy or citizenship is the rule of law. A critical component of that is an independent, incorruptible judiciary. The reality of the Nigerian is that we do not have that. That is our reality. It sometimes baffles me when I see how we continue to believe that we might somehow be entitled to a judiciary that is different from our police or that is different from our custom services, that is different from our mechanics, from us. Because what we're asking, if we're demanding an incorruptible, independent judiciary, is that we're asking that we ourselves are radically different from our judiciary. But as God would have it, as reality would have it, our judiciary is an exact reflection of who we are as a people, as a collective. And if that is not scary enough, I assure you, that is only about to get even worse, because now you have an hereditary succession in the judiciary. So if you say, well, how has the judiciary been under this administration? I can only tell you that it's been as ship-shape as each and every one of the other compromised institutions of the Nigerian state. It's doing exactly as the state expects it to do, which is why you're having these interesting judgments and all kind of legal somersaults and atilogu dancing.
It's a good time to be a lawyer right now, isn't it?
Thankfully, I'm not one. I am retired, thankfully.
Okay, practicing lawyer.
Well, I guess a tailor remains a tailor even after he has retired.
What would your response be to those who say that you're maybe judging the administration too hard?
If you notice, I have not presumed to judge this administration. I judged it before it ever came into existence.
Yeah, and then there's no possibility that it would surprise you?
Chief Bola of blessed memory once quipped. He said, "Blessed are those who do not hope, for they shall not be disappointed." I have no basis whatsoever to expect anything positive of this administration. However, I'm a Nigerian who is touched by the affliction of each and every Nigerian, and I also live here. My realities are completely Nigerian. So I continue to hope against hope that perhaps those who have forgotten about the fact of their mortality might somewhat be touched to realize that we all have only limited time to spend in this space, and they might just decide to be touched by the affliction of insanity and begin to build for posterity's sake. There is only so much money you can steal. There's only so much mansions that you can leave behind. There's nothing wrong with leaving behind some good name, a legacy of good works. Maybe they might just decide to flip and get on the right side.
It'd be great if they surprised you.
I would be happy to see that.
Let's talk about the role that the previous administration played. The current administration, oftentimes, I mean, we hear it all the time when they say that they inherited a struggling economy. So the role that the previous administration played, how important or what do we need to do to get to a point where we can actually hold these people to account? Now, bear in mind that the Constitution, of course, has the immunity clause that protects the president, protects the governors, so they're not able to answer for how a number of policies were implemented whilst they were in office. But what happens when they leave office?
You see, one of the first things you got when you got a Bola Ahmed Tinubu presidency is impunity and immunity for each and every one of the former thieves. Now, let's get that clear. First thing first, the moment you got a Bola Ahmed Tinubu presidency, each and every one of them got free. Get it out of jail card. You might have people being pressured here and there privately, quietly, as discreetly as possible to drop part of the money that have been publicly ascribed to them. And of course, every corrupt administration requires its own circles of anti-corruption, where other people will be labeled corrupt, and they have more than sufficient numbers to stoke the circles. So it is all well and good for them to be pointing at the Buhari administration as being responsible for this, but I do recall that Buhari also spent 8 years pointing at the Jonathan administration, and I cannot forget that the principal salesman of the Buhari administration, the person without whom there would never have been a Buhari, is Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu himself. He was the principal architect of Buhari's ascension to office. So I find it rather strange that the very man who brought Buhari to power, who has inherited and even told us that he intends to build on Buhari's legacy. Exactly what these legacies are, let the average Nigerian who feels the pain tell us. But he told us he was going to build on them, and he has actually surpassed a lot of those legacies today. So, frankly speaking, when they talk about having inherited a bad system, all I feel sometimes, maybe you guys should be looking in a mirror so that you see the persons to blame for what you are pointing at as the problem.
I still want us to talk a bit more about the fight against corruption. They have said that one of their 8-point agenda is, of course, fighting corruption, and they say that corruption is fighting back. Whilst the Section 36 of 5 of Constitution provides for presumption of innocence, we know that not everyone in the previous administration had, I want to assume that not everyone had their hands dirty, at least until a court of competent jurisdiction can clearly say that. But in the way that this current administration has started to investigate and handle some of these cases, for example, Hadi Sirika, who is being tried. Do you have
Yahya Bello,
the new EFCC boss, with how they are going about fighting corruption, would you say that at least there's something to spark hope, to renew some measure of hope?
Like I said, back in the days when the Romans ruled the world, the emperors always had their circuses to keep the plebs busy. The Nigerian circles of anti-corruption remains just exactly that as well, just a place to keep the public entertained and a place to also at least put some fear in the minds of some people as well. Let's be clear. We don't have any anti-corruption battle going on because the Nigerian problem is not corruption. Our problem is impunity. There is nothing that you are trying under corruption that are not triable under any multiple penal provisions, criminal laws in Nigeria. So what is corruption? Corruption is stealing. It means you have altered some papers. You took money without doing the work. So all these ones, when they use the word corruption, is for the special classes of offenses committed by those who enjoys the privilege of impunity. So don't let's get caught up in this their game There is no anti-corruption war going on because corruption is not the problem. Impunity is the problem. If the FCC was looking to carry someone like Dele Farotimi or you or him, we are not different from Yaya Bello now, Abi. But all of a sudden, Yaya Bello is enjoying the extension of the powers of impunity because the sitting person in charge of the powers of impunity in Kogi State made the powers of impunity available to him to enjoy. And all of a sudden, he has become unfoundable. I don't know what their current situation is. I don't follow the news cycle in Nigeria any longer, but I do know that there is no anti-corruption war going on. Yeah. None whatsoever, because we are not corrupt.
Yeah, you know, many people would agree with your analysis. But, you know, in the last couple of days, we've also heard of thoughts of Nobel laureates, Professor Wole Soyinka, you know, who, of course, you know, he has said that he will raid the government after a year. You know, we're hoping that we'll still hear from him. But he also has very strong thoughts, you know, concerning, you know, Labour Party candidate Peter Obi, which you supported, I believe. So I want, you know, your thoughts on people of his caliber, you know, and of course, you know, their freedom to also feel the way that they feel. But do you completely disagree with him?
Let me put it this way. If ever there was, if ever there lived a God, for me, Wole Soyinka is that God. I'm using the small g now.
Yes.
And he's a man for whom I have a lot of respect. And I have been very careful, very, very careful and deliberate about avoiding offering opinions related to his political positions. I think about 5 years ago, in fact, to be precise, 6 years ago now, in one of the essays included in my first book, Do Not Die in Their War,
yes,
there is a chapter there where I explain that anyone who is hanging around waiting for Professor Soyinka to speak their truth is being unfair to the man. The man was already in his 80s at the time, and that is entitled to choose his friends, and it doesn't have to be the one to speak our truth. That it is up to every individual who has a truth to tell to speak their own truth. Now, no truth is superior to the other. Truth is the truth is the truth. Is either the truth or is not the truth. Professor Soyinka is entitled to his opinions, and he has freely heard those, but I am more interested in how to see a change in the current situation in which we have found ourselves. Whether Peter Obi should contest in 2027 or not, is for Peter Obi to decide. Whether the subject of his running in 2027 is more important than the life and death realities of our current existence, that's for the people to decide. Professor Soyinka has heard his opinion. I do not agree with him. In fact, I vehemently disagree with him, but he has his opinion and he has offered it, and is completely entitled to them, and I am of the opinion that he is entitled to be wrong, and I think he is wrong.
All right.
Okay.
Still talking about opinion, let's get the opinion from our students from the Nigerian Institute of Journalism. I want to find out what your thought is regarding the corruption, the fight against corruption. Would you say that the current administration, in your opinion, has maybe made a good fight, fought a good fight, or has been fighting a good fight against corruption? Okay, can we have the mic?
Okay, good morning.
Good morning.
My opinion about the fight against corruption, just like what Dr. Farotimi said, that the problem in the country is not corruption, but impunity, which is true. The fight against corruption in the country hasn't been effective. I think
and you're speaking about this not just in the past, is it the past 1 year or the past 8-9 years?
the past 8-9 years, and even the current administration, because they've been in power 9 years ago, 8 years, 9 years ago. So it's same thing all around. You know, there is one thing about you trying to show it to the world, show it to people that this is what you're doing, and that what you're doing behind. And so what they are doing is they're just trying, it's just like a mannequin, showing that this is what you have, but that is not what you're doing behind. So I'm going to say the fight against corruption today hasn't been effective.
All right.
Because if we want to really truly fight corruption, we actually know how to go about it. And I'm going to say that if it was very effective, it would be so glaring to all to see.
Absolutely, I agree with you. And you know, beyond what our guests from the Nigerian Institute of Journalism, does someone else have something to add? Okay, as quickly as possible, please go ahead. Your name and then your contribution.
Good morning. My name is Oluwakemisola Adebisi. Speaking from what she said earlier on, I don't think we should applaud them for doing their job. If you're fighting corruption, I don't think they're fighting corruption anyways. The EFCC chairman has come out to say he has recovered a lot of money. But the thing still, like Dr. Farage said, it's impunity. You cannot arrest Yaya Bello, and he still is on social media, what would I say, acting as if they cannot arrest him. We are in a law, we should be in a, this Nigeria is a law-abiding country. So why have they not been able to arrest him? If it were any one of us, like he said earlier on, they will have arrested the person. So it is, I think it's a down for them, for the government, for them not to even arrest this man for now. Because if it was any other person, they would have been arrested. So I don't think they're fighting corruption.
So you believe
I think it's a squabble amongst them. Yes, I think it's a squabble. They're not fighting corruption. Yeah. Because the EFCC chairman has come and told us a lot of money they've arrested. But the one we can see on TV, Yaya Bello, you have not been able to arrest him.
All right. So and, you know, that's an interesting point you've raised. As quickly as possible, Dr. Faratimi, how do we then deal with this impunity?
Okay, so that I do not become guilty of the same thing that I am yelling about. I am not doctor. I know they are the ones who are trying to confer their PhD on me. I'm just daily Faratimi. Well,
yeah, Mr. Faratimi, how do we deal with this impunity? Like, are there things we need to do in the nearest possible future?
There is no magic wand to be waved, but it's just a simple thing. Institute the rule of law in Nigeria. Let the law rule. Let it apply equally to all. Let there be consequences for action. Impunity means that there are no consequences to wrongdoing. People get away with it, and they do it knowing they will get away with it. Let people pay for their crimes. But how do you do that when the entire system has been built on criminality and impunity? So what you are saying in short is, to stop this current madness, you actually have to restart completely.
Yeah. All right. Dele Faratimi, always interested in hearing your thoughts on these critical national issues. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me.
And happy 1 year inauguration day.
I'm always happy.
All right. We, of course, made sure to get your scores and assessment of this administration's 1 year in office. News Central's correspondent Obi Chinasa Gloria speaks with some Nigerian citizens, and let's quickly share with you what they had to say.
1 year of Bola Ahmed Tinubu is a year of suffering, a year of hunger. I quite surprised as a Democrat, somebody who has been on the background, somebody who has been suffering. Now you are the president, and people are suffering. Including all tribe, they're not happy with you.
29,000 bag of rice, and it becomes 80,000. You came in with 600 naira worth of a plastic of gari, and it's now 3,500 to 4,000. Tell me, what do I want to quantify it? Now in Lagos, agent and agreement fee is more than the house rent itself. What kind of economy is that?
Immediately he assumed office, Nigerian economy started dwindling, going down. Then again, what about the Naira exchange to dollars? Immediately he assumes office, we see Naira crumbling before US dollars. Today, it is 900, tomorrow 1,200, next tomorrow 2,000. Maybe in a week time, it's gonna be 2005. So, and all that. So what I'm trying to say is that Tinubu's 12 months in the office is full of pain, tears, and history.
Well, the man have already tried. He have tried his best. But for 1 year in office, I don't think that the man can go more forward. He will try his best as God gave him. But let him reverse back and think about the masses. It is not thinking about masses. Mr. President is thinking those that is higher, those that is more higher than when it is higher than him. But his government is favoring them, but his government is not favoring the masses. The masses are suffering. Let him reverse back. Let him think about God. Know that it is God that make him to be there, so that God will not take him away. Thank you.
Welcome back to Breakfast Central. We're still, of course, reviewing what Nigerians feel about the past 1 year of President Tinubu's administration. But let's share with you what's coming up next this morning on Breakfast Central. Coming up next, we'll still be reviewing President Tinubu's economic policies and looking at the impact it's had so far.
Welcome back. Now, judging by the momentum and speed of the first 30 days of the Tinubu-led administration, one would assume that Nigerians would already be experiencing better livelihood and, of course, a much better life. However, it's been 1 year since the discontinuance of a petrol subsidy and since the unification of the exchange rate, actions that have further plunged Nigerians into more hardship.
To join us in reviewing President Tinubu's economic policies in the last year is economist and CEO of Nairametrics, Ugodre Obichukwu. Good morning and thank you for joining us.
Hi, good morning. Nice to have me.
So exactly a year ago today, we all heard the phrase, subsidy is gone. And that seemed to determine the trajectory of how things went in the coming months, even though the even though the absence or the removal of subsidy is now it's been debatable, especially because of some experts and their opinions regarding this. But I would ask you, what your thoughts were when you heard the bold declaration of subsidy being gone, and can you categorically say now that subsidy is truly gone?
Interesting questions. So, flashback to May 29, when we're all watching the president give his maiden speech. Out of nowhere, we just heard fuel subsidy is gone. So, I mean, I kind of gasped my breath, and I guess everyone in his team did the same as well. Everyone was surprised. It was actually off script. It wasn't meant to be in there. But it was a very bold and courageous move for the president at that time. And I think I was one of those who applauded it. We all have been calling for removal of fuel subsidy for some years now, obviously because of the negative impact it has on government's fiscal revenues. A lot of people didn't know that fuel subsidy was being paid essentially by borrowing. So government fiscal deficit was widening, which is really bad for the economy. And so it kind of looked like a very good move at the time. However, it's not just removing fuel subsidy, and we've all learned that, yes, you can make bold moves like that, but what comes after is really what matters. And so a lot of the things that Nigerians expected in terms of the support that you would want, from an economic perspective, is it, better transportation, better roads, a lot of the infrastructure development that you needed to see to sort of, help with the fuel subsidy removal. We haven't seen any of that. And so that's pretty shocking to a lot of people, and that's why Nigerians just can't stomach it. It's difficult, stressful. You now pay more than 3 times the actual amount, so you're sacrificing a lot, but you're not seeing any commensurate, improvement in your life. And so the obvious question I asked to, some of your guys here is, has your life been better in the last 1 year compared to now? I guess for a lot of people it's no. So nobody has seen the impact of it. So, because the point is that Nigerians like to sacrifice a lot. Nigerians will sacrifice for you all the time. But at the end of the day, what does that really amount to? And so if you look back again, back to your question, yes, it was a bold move, but it hasn't really panned out well. And again, I think there's still some form of subsidy going on. So it's not like you've actually removed it, as you would think. The World Bank said it recently that there's still subsidy, so you probably still need to even increase, the prices. So all in all, bold move, good. For the macroeconomy, perhaps okay, because at least fiscal deficit is reduced. But for the regular, ordinary Nigerians, it's just been hellish.
So when you say it's a bold move, you also mentioned that it was off script. So was that, I mean, does that show that the government, didn't really have a plan? The president didn't really have a plan? Because I remember, I did see, that you celebrated it. You tweeted, so much economic policy changes in the space of just 2 weeks from President Tinubu, unprecedented. All this without even appointing ministers and hundreds of special advisors. This is what I mean by you're ready to work from day one.
Yes.
You said this is beyond impressive per Niger standards. So I know you've clarified this, also because of the backlash that you got on X. But is this showing, because they've also had a lot of policies that they had to reverse.
Yeah.
Is this showing that they really know what they're doing with regards to the economy, or they're just trying whatever it is that works? Well,
in hindsight, it kind of sounds like it was a bit of showmanship. So at that time, when we saw a lot of these policies being pushed out, it was unprecedented because we're used to seeing governments start out very slowly, especially at the presidential level. And so when you see a president come on and, from straight out of the blocks, start to push out economic policies, you believe that, that is really going to be followed up by some concrete actions. So it wasn't just for subsidy removal. He took out the CBN governor at the time. The exchange rate was immediately, unified. So there were a lot of things that people had called for that he was doing. And so it looked good. But midway into the first 3 months, we then started to observe, wait a minute, we haven't even seen your cabinet yet, right? So we have so much challenges. It kind of sounded like you're going to have your cabinet like in the first month because he had a very solid economic team leading all the way to the elections. And we all saw him travel with most of these guys. And so it was a no-brainer that within a month or two, you were going to see, ministers being announced.
But that took about 3 months.
Exactly, if not even more. And so even the CBN governor took way longer as well, right? Because we knew the acting CBN governor wasn't going to be there, forever. So that was where we started to see problems. Like, we've seen this happen before. It happened in 2015 when Buhari came in and took months to get his cabinet in. And when you don't get your cabinet in, we're doing 1 year today, but essentially these guys have had maybe 6, 7 months.
No, they have 9 months.
Exactly,
I think
9
in
months.
a day or so it would be 9 months. So do you think it would have made any fundamental difference if these policies, so the unification of the exchange rate, do you think it would have made any difference if the cabinet was established before these policies were announced?
Well, to what extent, I don't know, right? But I think it would have made a difference, especially, nomination or appointment of a CBN governor, Minister of Finance, or coordinating Minister of Finance, some of the key ministries that really drive the economy, even some parastatals. A lot of those things would have helped set a lot of plans in motion. And I think Nigerians would have seen it. You would have seen some actions. We all saw the ministers defending their 1 year in office or something last week. So it wasn't really impressive. I don't know if you were impressed by it. I wasn't. So it wasn't actually impressive. So you could see that there was really nothing much that they could say they've done. You know how bureaucratic Nigeria is anyway. So it's one thing for you to be Minister of Finance, but being able to actually sit down and run that ministry is a different ballgame. So I think it would have made a difference. 3 months is a long time, right? It's a long time. And so that is where I think you had a lot of missteps. And that's why you're seeing a lot of the policies, confusion everywhere, and things are not really going as well as they should go. There's a huge dislink, shockingly, between fiscal authorities and the monetary authorities. Even though I've been in the room before with the Minister of Finance and the CBN governor, and you could see quite some synergy. They have a history, have a relationship. They actually work pretty well compared to the former Minister of Finance and the CBN governor. We all always had, a little bit of friction. So these ones actually work well. But in terms of the actual coordination from the ministry and the CBN perspective, it's not there. So the CBN is fighting inflation as much as it can with the only tool it has, which is monetary policy. But on the fiscal side, you're not seeing that much. And the CBN governor himself has said it, that, look, you can't win the inflation battle by just raising NPR, right? We've raised NPR so much now that I don't know how far we can raise it. I actually think they shouldn't even raise it anymore, because the impact is not necessarily being felt on the streets. So things are still expensive, and that's because a lot of the drivers of inflation are not regular things that you and I. It's not interest rate.
Why would you say that the increasing of the NPR is not having the intended effect that it should have? I've heard criticism leveled against it, saying that the other factors such as food inflation is being affected by insecurity and several other arguments. So from your perspective, why would you say that it's not an effective tool right now in managing the inflation? So
the conventional wisdom for most, economists or analysts or whatever out there globally is that when you have galloping inflation, a central bank uses monetary policy to slow it down. So monetary policy essentially is you increase interest rates. And so when you increase interest rates, then you're telling investors essentially, don't keep your money, don't spend money, don't borrow, just keep it in the bank, and then we'll give you interest rate, because you're trying to slow down money supply in the economy. And by doing that, that means people won't buy much anymore, and then prices will start to go down. That's how these things work. But Nigeria is very peculiar. Nigeria is not your regular everyday country. So you can raise interest rates as much as you can. A large section of the informal economy doesn't depend on bank lending to price their product. What do they depend on? They look at things like fuel price. They look at transportation from one place to the other. They look at electricity. They look at insecurity. They look at food. For example, you grow crops from maybe Benue State. By the time you get to Lagos or Akwa Ibom, half is spoiled already. Yeah. But they're still going to price it like it's the entire thing. So instead of the price actually being half of what it is full. So these are all the things that feed into it. What is the CBN going to do? Remember, this was also one of the things the former CBN was trying to do. So they were doing monetary policy, and then they thought, you know what, let's start doing development finance. I started doing the job of the ministry, and then what we have is a basket of problems. And that now even made the CBN governor look like he was, an emperor. And that's when they say Nigeria has happened to you. You try to maybe wrestle things or try to fix things on the main street, and then that now creates a whole new problem. And the current CBN governor said, I ain't doing that. I'm not going to development finance. I'm going to stick to my lane, which is monetary policy. So let the guys on the fiscal policy side do their job.
There's also been a lot of criticism with regards. I mean, the vice president claimed that Nigeria has secured $20 billion, foreign direct investment, and all of that. So I want your thoughts on that one. Are we truly, receiving that level of FDI in Nigeria today? What are they getting wrong in order to attract that level of FDI in the country today? And of course, is even realistic that anybody would invest in Nigeria? You see, of course, Total Energies, is moving to Angola, I believe. There's many other companies who have left. To talk about the FDI mystery.
Okay, so I guess the reverse question is have you seen any of that money? No. So we look at the data, we haven't seen it. To be fair to them, first quarter data for capital importation is not out. So we don't know to what extent. So all we've been hearing from the minister is we're expecting. I mean, there's this joke that we often share in a WhatsApp group that we'll say line of sight. And anybody say the line of sight? Because he keeps saying there's a line of sight. We haven't seen it yet. Just yesterday again, they said, there's this oil and gas deal, $7 billion or thereabout has been signed. It hasn't come in yet. But fun fact, I don't think we've done more than $3 billion annually on FDI in over a decade, every year.
Yes.
So FDIs are traditionally very small. Now, FPI is where we tend to get a lot of investors in. And last year, we barely did just $3.9 billion or so in total capital importation. So investors are obviously not coming into Nigeria at the moment. Now, what is the government trying to do? So one of the reasons why you're seeing NPR go up, which is interest rate, is the higher the rates, then the more incentive you give FPIs to bring money into the country. We've done it before and it worked. We did it in 2018, 2019. If you recall, the exchange rate was $3.60 to the $1 for a long time, for about a year, 2 years. And that was because we're offering foreign investors high interest rates in exchange for bringing their dollar in. But hey, it's a different world today. Yep. That time, interest rates globally was next to zero. It was very low. And capital outflows was favorable to emerging markets. But today, it's different. Interest rate globally is high. So capital outflows is going more to the West than to frontier emerging markets like Nigeria. So the question is, anybody who has $1 billion, $10 million, would likely want to keep that money in the US or in Europe. In fact, at the IMF event that happened, spring meeting in April, the story was that a third of global outflows is going to the United States. So we're in a different world now. So the competition is even stiffer for foreign investment. So you can't just say, oh, because we have 200 million population, we have natural resources, you think investors are going to come. No, if you like, give them 30%. There's got to be a lot of things that we have to do internally. They need to also see that we have our fiscal side sorted out before you start to see a lot of this global.
All right. I want us to bring in our students from the Nigerian Institute of Journalism to give us a clear picture of how inflation has hit them, you know, in your prices, the prices of goods and services. But before then, we have statistics. The cable has given us numbers to show exactly, and we're going to project them. If you can see, Tinubu's 1 year, the economic indices show that petrol price then was 238 naira. Oh, the good old days. And now it's about 701, maybe 600 and something, depending on where you're buying it from. That's a 194.5% increase of petrol. Food inflation then was 24.82%, and now it's 40.54%. That's a 37.52% increase. There's an increase in diesel price from 844 naira to 1,415 naira. Inflation rate then was 22.41%. Now we have 33.69%. We can see the all-share index and we can see the foreign reserves. But all these just sound like numbers that the average Nigerian do not understand. They just want to be able to ensure that they can make sense of how much they are earning, how much they are spending, how much they have to pay for goods and services in the market. So to help us get a clear picture of that today, we're going to still be speaking with our in-studio guests, the students from the Nigerian Institute of Journalism, and they're going to share with us a picture of what it is like for you. So tell us your name, and in the past 1 year, which would you say have been the most shocking items you've had to purchase? So if you can give us the price of what you used to, you know, how much you used to buy it before and how much you're spending now. Okay?
Thank you. Okay, let me say something. Thank you again. I think from last time, let me use a product I use constantly, panty liners. It was at 800 naira. Then yesterday, 2,000.
Wow. I mean, I'm a working class woman, and I remember trying to go buy sanitary products 2 months ago, and I left there very angry. And this is me who is working and earning a salary, and I began to imagine those in the IDP camps, those who don't have as much as I have. I don't have all the money, but I'm still complaining. And those who are the lower end, how has this impacted them? Well, yesterday was World Menstrual Hygiene Day. Some people can't even afford to buy products. Nobody who go chop food before you go talk of menstruation at this point. Talk to us about yours.
Good morning. My name is Babatunde Ifeoluwa. And before I talk about, I sell perfumes. Before I talk about how the inflation of perfume has been, I would like to say that, firstly, what I understand, when you're trying to bring change to people, you carry them along. I don't think the government is carrying us along. When you're trying to bring change to people, there's what they call dialogue. Like he said, like our guest said, he said the removal of fuel subsidy was out of script, just came out of the blues. It's quite shocking. And also, when it comes to plans, I feel like the government make plans without considering the
impact,
the outcome, and forgetting that we are the receiving end. The removal of fuel subsidy has affected hike in transportation, hike in food, the cost of food, and making it hard for the average Nigerians to live. I sell perfumes, and it has been very hard, I must say. Perfumes of, okay, let's say Yara. There's a perfume called Yara. Perfume of 15,000 is now 26,000, not for retail, wholesale. Then how would I want to even, how much am I going to add to the perfume to sell to other people? It's quite disturbing.
And would you say that you've seen maybe an increase or a reduction in patronage, or has patronage stayed stable?
It has reduced. It has reduced. It has been hard for me. People that used, if I have like, okay, 50% of people that buy from me, people don't buy the perfumes that they used to buy before. People are just limiting to deodorants, and there's not much gain on products like that. There are products that I know that I get gain from. People don't patronize as much. And then I would like to say that I don't think there's any concrete plan. I don't think the government has a concrete plan. They are trying different things to their, what would I say? Okay, let's say last 2 weeks now, they were talking about cyber security levy, and all of a sudden, they are not talking about it anymore.
They've withdrawn.
Yes, they are trying different things to see what will make the economic balanced, and it's quite disturbing.
All right, thank you very much for sharing that. Okay, we have one more comment, very quickly, please. Okay, Manuel.
I think there's an aspect of the situation we're not paying attention to. So Nigerians is in our nature to take advantage of surge in prices. So I think while we are focusing on the ineffectiveness of the government in regulating prices, let's also focus on how Nigerians are taking advantage of this current situation to add to the commodities that they sell, and what the government can do to ensure, maybe they should they get themselves involved in how wholesalers, retailers also price their goods.
They actually have. I'm sure that Godre would address that. But before then, let's quickly hear from him. Yes, thank you.
Okay, so my name is Dupo Teniola. I'm from Nigerian Institute of Journalism. So from what our guest has talked about, maybe not make it as bare or as straightforward to ordinary Nigerians, but what I got, some of the things I got from that is that there's a big disconnect from what the government is trying to do. A lot of people see what the government is trying to do. Today, they introduce something, tomorrow they take it back. While some people may see it as maybe government is not serious, maybe they've not thought about it enough, I see it as work in progress. However, just like she said, there's a lot of disconnect. Just like he said, of two arms of the fiscal, financial arms of government not seemingly gelling, it's the same thing where what the government is doing at their indoor, level, is not communicated enough. Yep. And of course, there's a big discord. There's a lot of micro problems that are not addressed. Just like he said, people are taking advantage. Government is doing their own. So people are just, just like in a jungle, scavenging and doing all sorts. So I feel there's a lot that government needs to address. The rents are high, homeowners are taking advantage, real estate.
And I really want Godre to react to this, because this is an angle that we've seen a number of people talk about. We saw this when there was a Naira scarcity, where the POS operators were said, we hope people will buy land with all the money that you're making at this point. So Nigerian business people have been accused of taking advantage where there is an inflation or with a struggling economy. But some of us would argue that these people need to recoup the money that they invested in their business in the first place. So how do you explain people automatically hearing that the dollar has gained strength and immediately increasing the stock in their stores?
Okay, I think that it's very important for Nigerians to understand that we're in a free market economy. We're not in a socialist or communist economy where you see price control. Please never, ever, ever ask for price control. It never works. It's a recipe for chaos, right? Government should never be involved in price control or trying to fix prices for people. That's the power of demand and supply. Demand and supply would often, it might take time, but it drives competition. And then where you see somebody pricing products artificially or at a price that is not realistic, that's an opportunity for somebody to compete, and that's how free markets work. Now, however, what government should do, and to an extent they are doing, is where you see monopolies, because monopolies should not be allowed to operate freely, even in a free market. So because when you see a monopoly, then a monopoly can often just be increasing prices without caring, right? So that's where you tend to see things like regulation and price control and trying to ensure that the prices that they are setting is favorable, or the prices is reflective enough of their cost so that you don't unduly take advantage. Now, government also involves itself in mega utilities like telcos, where there might not be many of them, but they serve millions of people. So in cases like that as well, you tend to see regulation. It's not just typical to Nigeria, it's a global thing.
All
But
right.
please, let's not ever encourage
price. All right. So I would also like you to speak, about taxation as an economic policy. But that will be when we come back. We will take a very short break. When we come back, we continue the discussions this morning on the Tinubu presidency and, of course, its economic drive so far. Welcome back. Still talking the Tinubu administration 1 year down the line. And, of course, how well and how far Nigeria has gone, of course, surviving the economic policies of the current administration. We still have with us this morning Ugo Dre, who, of course, has joined us to have his thoughts on these things. I want you to speak on taxation as an economic policy, because that's what it seems that they've been doing most of. The cybersecurity levy, increment in electricity levy, tariff, increment in petrol subsidies and all of that. When the president was campaigning, he did speak a little bit about widening the tax bracket and some of all of that. So do you think that this is most of what they seem to be doing to raise funds?
Okay, so let me try and put things into proper perspective for the viewers and even the folks here. Nigeria has been running a fiscal deficit for over a decade. So fiscal deficit essentially is when the government's revenue is lower than the amount it actually spends. And one of the problems of a fiscal deficit is that it often leads to exchange rate depreciation, purely economic phenomenon. It often also leads to inflation, because when a government is spending more than it earns, it is essentially borrowing, isn't it? Exactly. So it's borrowing. So when it's borrowing, it borrows at an interest rate and it pays. And so that also expands government's debt. And then to make it worse, if a lot of the borrowing is not going into productive causes or sectors, creating jobs, aiding economic growth, that even exacerbates the problem. And so that's what we've been facing for years. And so the government is saying, you know what, we can't keep borrowing, we can't keep expanding the fiscal deficit. Our tax to GDP ratio is one of the lowest in the world, which is about 10% or so, or 9%. In most countries, it's at 40, it's at 50, even at 60, even at 70%. So the government is not collecting enough taxes. So it's not like we don't have taxes. It's not like they need to raise taxes. That's what some of us are against. I don't think they should raise taxes anywhere. I don't even think there should be new taxes. There's just enough taxes that you should even consolidate and may perhaps reduce. The focus should be on ensuring that most people pay their tax. And that's where we seem to be faltering. And of course, that's because more than 50% of the economy is informal. So it's difficult to get them to pay tax. And so what you're seeing now is a lot of efforts by the tax authorities, particularly the FIRS, in trying to introduce technology to tax collection. They all have your BVN, your NIN, your bank account is all linked. They want to link your phone to your bank account. This all just gives them visibility into how people are making money, and so that they can be more effective with taxes. So that's essentially why you're seeing a lot of these tax things go up. But what I think is a challenge, and what they should really stop doing, is trying to create more taxes.
Wow. Anyway, there's so many things to talk about, but we have to move on to other conversations. Thank you very much, Ugo Dre Obichukwu. It's a pleasure to have had you. All right. We, of course, are going to be looking at the scorecard and seeing the role that the opposition has to play in the current administration and what their thoughts are. During the 2023 presidential elections, the opposition party, the PDP, represented by its candidate, Alhaji Atiku Abubakar, was optimistic that victory was certain. Nevertheless, the emergence of the then APC candidate, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, as president led to questions concerning the outcome of the elections. PDP chieftain Bode George talked about the electoral flaws and promised to leave the country should Jagaban, as the president is often called, win. Is Chief Bode George still planning on leaving the country? Osagi Ogbonwa has more in this exclusive.
The 29th of May marks 1 year since the inauguration of the Bola Ahmed Tinubu administration. It has come with loads of questions, and those, of course, who have questioned whether the government is taking Nigeria in the right direction. Today, we are speaking with Chief Olabode George, elder statesman and PDP chieftain, to share his views on how the last 1 year has been run by the Bola Ahmed Tinubu administration. Thank you very much for joining us, sir.
Always my pleasure.
I will start with asking, you weren't one of the biggest fans of Bola Tinubu administration in the build-up to the elections. You know, you were one of those voices that spoke, against it. You even said that you very likely would leave Nigeria. But of course, here we are in Lagos, still have you here with us. So let's start with that. You, of course, have stayed back. Can you tell us about that?
I said it. I said it, and I'm not afraid to repeat it. But you know, when I spoke with many stations, many TV and newspaper stations, then, you know, as a committed Nigerian, they sent some of their leaders here to talk for us to have a union. We have a saying in my language that the more the merrier. You know, if you put your heads together, you get more information, and then we will run the system together. So I won't mention names, but first, the younger one, the first sent, is like my little brother in Lagos State. He came over and said, "Sir, we knew we have offended you, and so we like you. We have come on behalf of our big boss to ask you that we are sorry."
All right, let's move forward, and talk about 1 year after. You weren't necessarily excited about, his being president. Would you say that you've been proven right?
I have looked at, the major indices, the economic indices in this country, will send any right-thinking fellow to the canvas. All is not well. People are hungry, and so people are angry. The most important job of any governance or government is to ensure security of lives and property.
Yes.
Can we say we are okay? Whether you are a rich man or a poor man, anywhere you are in this country, can you factually state that, yeah, I'm fine? Who is fine? So that is one major area that they need to focus on.
Is it, policies that you expected from President Bola Ahmed Tinubu that, of course, he has implemented have failed? With regards, of course, petrol subsidy removal, with the Naira policies, that have currently, of course, sent the economy.
I'm talking about the Constitution. That's the centerpiece of all our activities. You could see within a year, on the very first day he made the announcement, he was making his broadcast, he said subsidy scrapped.
Yes.
Now, some have come. I'm not in that field. Some have come and they've told us that there was nothing like subsidy when Buhari was there. We don't know the truth. Look, I have been advising, it's not a matter of hatred or jealousy. I have served severally in this country at every level.
Yes.
What am I looking for now? If I cannot face you and tell you the truth, then I would not be happy with my conscience.
Yeah. So what is the truth that you would say to him?
I'm asking them. Some people said there was subsidy. Others said there was no subsidy. It just came subsidy or no subsidy. What are the facts behind this issue? The government owes it to explain to the people of this country. Because when you go out campaigning to people politically, what you are telling them is, trust me, that I will manage the resources of your land for your benefit. Is that what is happening? I can talk to them now. This is like, although it's just 1 year, so they still have another year. So let us be factual. Let us be truthful to ourselves. All is not well. Apart from the security of lives and property, what about the economic indices? Who is fooling who? This country is on the precipice to collapse. Each time they will, the central bank governor will go and look for some dollar, borrow some dollar to show up. Simple, basic knowledge in economics. Too much money chasing too few goods, hyperinflation. Okay, what is the inflation rate now in Nigeria? Can you go to any bank? I want to do this project. You sweat like hell, writing, trying to convince them.
Yes.
And in the end, it doesn't get to you. The dollars allocated for that purpose in every bank is not met. You see, managing directors of banks now have become humongously wealthy. And I kept asking, what is it that they do inside the bank that will make them so wealthy? So now, I'm happy Mr. President quickly stopped this. The something payment, the 0.5.
Cybersecurity levy, yes.
Look, it's utter madness. People are struggling. It is your money that is there. You transfer it, they say use your something, you transfer, and then you pay a tax for that. Where is that done? I plead and I want to salute Nigerians for their patience.
What is your reality today? Of course, you're an elder statesman. Obviously, we know a lot more fortunate than many other Nigerians. But what has changed with your own lifestyle?
My own lifestyle, I had to, when you close to 80, you reduce your food intake.
Yes.
You reduce so many things, including alcohol and all that. You still do a little bit of exercise to keep your heart and all that flow and your blood flowing properly. And you do make sure you do your medicals. All my kids are now all grown, except the last one. And so but would you be quiet and see things going in a wrong direction and you don't talk? We make a suggestion, and I will still repeat it today.
Yes.
That the president requires an economic team and advisors. They are not to be reported, because it will be a night meeting with these selected experts. Now look at everybody seated there. Apart from Soludo, there's no academia there. I can't see any. You bring in Dangote. These are practitioners. These are the people in the field of economic activities. He needs to further expand and bring some professors, whether those who are still there teaching and those who are not teaching, but who are experts in economic
almost the same way the Obasanjo administration, ran the country.
What did he
back
do?
then.
Everybody sees Baba and he thinks it's only him that knows. No, there were experts. Nobody knew them. They will come in the night. It's not a matter of just photo opportunity that you are not this. That's not okay. What have we done now? Each time the governor of central bank is here and there and is going out, he's to be seen and not heard. The economic and finance minister is the one who should, on behalf of the government, go around. When did you see the president of the American bank, like the equivalent of going around anywhere, or the one in England? He's to be seen and not heard.
Yes.
Yeah, right. But we are still pushing. Cardoso is running up and down. And I said, listen, they come. His job, the job of the central bank anywhere, is to manage the fiscal and monetary policy of the government. His boss is in the villa. Yeah. And the minister of... it's not for him to be... and what have they done? I saw all these bankers, these same bankers that created all this mess. They are sitting as economic advisors. Is that a joke? They are beneficiaries of it. And I'm still challenging them. The dollars allocated to their bank, how did they distribute it? How did they manage money meant for Nigerians who are trying to import either raw materials or buy new machines for their factory or buy spare parts for their factories? That's what that dollar is meant for.
Yes.
But this issue of round tripping is still heavily going on. We cannot go on like this. All is not well. Now he has seen, if we don't tell him the truth, he will say, well, he was going like that. Did you talk?
There's also been something very controversial in the last few weeks, which is the Lagos-Calabar Coastal Highway. It has, of course, come with its own loads of controversy. Some people said it's the fastest Nigerian government project they've ever seen. Also, of course, with the mention of high-tech, the Shaguri family name also. Is any part of that surprising for you? And would you also have advised against it?
There is no perpetuity in governance. That's why the Constitution defines every 4 years, go back to the electorate.
Yes.
And they are to think within their mindsets, has this man added any value to my life or to my children or my family or to the entire Nigerians? Yes or no? Because if they come to you campaigning, they're asking you, trust me.
Yes.
And you look at it, what has he done before for a living? What has he, what kind of lifestyle does he have? The man who cannot manage his house is asking for my vote to go and manage the resources of the land for his benefit. I think our age in the democratic dispensation is still a little bit too, like a young person. But morning shows the day. That Calabar, yes, conceptually makes a lot of sense. But is that the most important project now that we need? Hey, I feel sorry for a lot of people who are located this beach land for. It is painful when you listen to them. Are they going to compensate them? Or do you mean they don't headed out? I'm a Lagosian. Did these people just headed out there to occupy the land? I don't know. But to put human face to that policy,
yes,
they must call a meeting of those people to resolve. If they finally decide they were going to do this Calabar to Lagos road, but I have also worked in government as a military and as a civilian.
Give your own quick rating, 1 to 10, the last 1 year.
I want to wait till next year before I will score him. I've told him, go to any location. They have, they went through and said, oh, palliatives, palliatives, palliatives. And during Buhari's time, he appointed one lady as humanitarian minister.
Affairs Minister, yes.
How was she distributing the money, cash given to her? Where is the data in Nigeria? Who followed it up to say, okay, you collected all that money. Who are the beneficiaries of this? Nobody. We don't know them. We don't know them. So that is not the proper way to manage a massive nation like this. Now, suddenly, oh, palliatives, oh, give them money. It is not money. Too much money, chasing too few goods, hyperinflation.
Okay, so we would hold on for the second
another
year.
By that time, it would have been well defined.
Chief Bode George, once again, thank you very much for letting us into your home. And in a year's time, we're going to be back again to have a proper a proper verdict on on what Bola Tinubu administration has been like so far. A very interesting conversation we had with Chief Olabode George, elder statesman. We, of course, have more of these conversations coming your way this morning as we x-ray 1 year since the inauguration of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. The inauguration, or the administration rather, has had a complex relationship with the judiciary. While there's been a lot of efforts to strengthen the judicial system and promote judicial independence, there have also been worrying signs of executive overreach and interference. Olive Modi is in an exclusive with the former president of the Nigerian Bar Association, and a senior advocate of Nigeria, Dr. Olisa Agbakoba, finds out the real state of the country's judicial system and if any hope can be put in this administration to support true judicial reforms. We've seen, of course, these things that have happened in the country in the last couple of weeks with court rulings being sought and being given left and right. But let's quickly share with you Olisa Agbakoba's views on the judiciary.
This morning, we're joined by Dr. Olisa Agbakoba, SAN. It's a pleasure to have you, sir. Thank you very much for joining us. Marking this 1 year in office, would you say that this administration has positioned itself as one that is passionate about reforming the judiciary?
Well, actually, it's not the job of the administration, strictly speaking, because there are three arms of government: executive, legislature, and the judiciary. So it's the head of the judiciary, that is the CJN, that deals with that. So if I were President Tinubu, I would say, it's not my job. It's the job of the NJC, National Judicial Council, too. But I get your broad point, which is about how far has, reforms been felt around policy questions, rule of law, the functions of the courts, the functions of the legislature, the executive, all of that. For me, I'll give just above an average score.
All right. And let's talk about, I'm glad that you've mentioned the different arms of government.
Sure.
The independence of the judiciary is a conversation that we've had over and over again.
Absolutely.
And lately, there have been those who have started canvassing for an actual separation, especially because we're looking at the role that the executive plays in appointing judges.
Sure.
So is this a position that you align yourself with? How exactly are we faring regarding achieving actual independence of the judiciary?
It's a tough question you ask because there's a mixture of things. So it's not quite accurate that the judiciary gets appointments from the executive. It's actually the NJC.
Yeah, exactly. But then the president has to...
It's an endorsement.
Yes.
And
so
generally...
some people say that they should totally separate that so that...
No, there has to be Montesquieu, one of the great thinkers of modern democracy. So there has to be checks and balance. So you don't want an autocrat. So if you separate everything, then one arm will run away. So there must be ways in which one arm needs the other to function. So the executive cannot do anything unless it presents an appropriation estimate to the National Assembly. If the National Assembly says no, that's it. So that's a check. So the judiciary cannot just say, you know what, we can appoint our judges. So they can nominate their judges. So the National Judicial Council, where I sat for 6 years, will nominate judges from the High Court of Appeal and Supreme Court, and then send it for endorsement by the president, who himself cannot say, I hereby appoint the CJN. He now sends it to the Senate. You see the link for confirmation. So it goes through that process. So all three arms, independent in their own way, need to cohabit to get government working. And that's absolutely good, because no one government can say, I can do without the other.
Okay. Now, let's talk about the welfare of the judges, which has been a conversation that we've talked about for the longest time. Very recently.
It's very poor.
Mm.
It's very, very poor. Maybe total package will be about 2 million. There was a case which was very pathetic, and I regret that it was decided the way it was decided. So a judge of the Federal High Court, the mom was dying of kidney failure. So what would he do? He turned to the people he knew. So he called a couple of lawyers and said, look, my mom is in danger, and they gave contributions. It was considered to be corruption. I didn't consider it to be corruption, because he was driven to that state because the quality of service conditions are so poor. Now, when a man is dissatisfied, it affects output. So the first point I always made when I sat on the NJC was, if you don't wiggle with the package of judges, you get a poor output. So that contributes significantly to the public distrust. There's a trust deficit in the way in which they see the judiciary. A fundamental problem is the lack of funding, proper funding. That needs to change.
Okay. And this trust deficit that you speak, it's very evident. Also, we started to see after the last elections, a number of Nigerians started to lose trust in the ability of the judiciary to be the last hope of the common man. In fact, a slogan I did see was, it's becoming the lost hope of the common man.
Sure.
So how can we sort of reestablish that trust for the judiciary in the heart of the Nigerian citizens?
The whole package. Don't pull the judiciary away. The whole package. There's a distrust. There's a trust deficit in the way in which people relate to their governors. By their governors, I mean National Assembly, judiciary. It's a package. So since you ask specifically about the judiciary, the first step to resolve the trust deficit is to take care of them. Because a judge cannot be writing longhand under a tree. I hope you know some judges sit under trees. Some have no electricity even in their homes to write judgments. The conditions are so terrible that not anybody in the rank of silk will accept it. So we need to play around with what we need to do for the judiciary. You must deal with their conditions of service.
Well, we're saying that there's a judicial office holders bill, so we're hopeful that we start to see things looking up for the judges very soon. I want to take the conversation now to some peculiar cases that have happened. Going to River State, for example, there's been a lot of drama between the former governor and the current governor. Now, Governor Siminalayi Fubara and His Excellency Nyesom Wike seemingly had conflict, and the president intervened by virtue of the peace accord, which turned out to be not so peaceful. Now, some Nigerians have criticized the intervention of the president, saying that he's circumventing the provision of the Constitution in Section 109 that provides for what happens when the 27 lawmakers vacate their seat. So, what do you think about how it was handled with the peace accord, and how do you think it should have been handled if you don't support that?
I wouldn't even answer that question. I would even say, do we have a politically mature class? That's the issue. So, rules work to the extent that the people who play in the context of those rules have maturity. The political class here, generally speaking, is far from mature. So you will find carpet crossing across the board, not just Rivers. Rivers is only one example. It's been happening. There's been no consequence. The principle of godfatherism has occurred. So why is River State any big deal? When they asked me the question, it's no big deal. I'm not surprised. So Governor Wike was there. He put his guy. We all know that. I'd never heard of, what is his name?
Siminalayi Fubara.
What?
Siminalayi Fubara.
Okay, Fubara. I'd never heard of him. Suddenly he appears. Wike himself, I never heard of him. He was chief of staff to Rotimi Amechi. Ruti Memechi, I never heard of him. He was working in the office in the hospital of Dr. Peter Dili. So those who make these people expect total loyalty. Oh, you're disloyal. That's it. War. And in that context, the Constitution is thrown out of the window. So the 27 men you see who crossed, don't they know what the Constitution says? If you cross, you're out. Except you cross on the basis of a division. So the question would be, was there a division in the House in Rivers? I don't know. But that's the broad principle. But it's not about the Constitution. In the United Kingdom, there's no Constitution. It's about the maturity of the people who play politics. Our politics is very immature. So people want to go there by all means, even if it meant killing their mothers. If I was a committed PDP man and the structure of the party in the state said, well, you want to be governor? You can't be PDP. It's going to be APC. The guy would jump into the other party. So parties don't mean anything. The manifestos mean nothing. What they're looking at is enrichment. That's what's holding down our politics. So the fundamental question would be, where do we begin to find people who understand that politics is not a do or die thing? That's the challenge. Because we don't have them, generally speaking. We have some fine men who are in politics and women, before you accuse me of being gender insensitive. But the problem is the immaturities. You know, I don't want to say this, but I'll say this on Democracy Day. Are we really mature for democracy? Deep conceptual question. Very deep. And I'll give 2 examples, or maybe 3. The man in Kigali is not a Democrat. He's been in power for about 30 years. But he gets what we call formal democracy or electoral autocracy. So he continues to be there. But they love him. China is not democratic, but they brought almost 900 million people out of poverty. Lee Kuan Yew wasn't a Democrat, but he got re-elected. Now ask the people of these 3 countries, what do you think of our leaders? They say, this guy did well for us. So here where we have formal democracy, will the person on the streets say, on this day of democracy, May 29, I'm happy? Well, that answer will be no. So the real conceptual question I'm throwing out today to politicians is, are we ripe for democracy? We shouldn't take it for granted. Where is why we're democratic? Yes, fine. But where is it? Where is it? That's why I like Obasanjo's redefinition of democracy. It must be by the consent and contentment of Nigerians. So you are forced to say to your kids at home, I'm going to give you food. Do our leaders think in that context? Do they see you and me and say, Odisa needs to eat morning, afternoon, and evening? Or they just take all the money? That's the problem.
So now that you've highlighted that the key problem we have is political immaturity, how do we get around this?
I don't know. I have no idea. That's the truth. I don't have the answer. I wish I could wave a wand. Hey, all you politicians, become good men. I don't know. It's a long process. I've been in this thing for about 40-something years. I started this process of getting involved in struggle for democracy, and we're still struggling. Just conceive of whether in 30 years you'll be asking this question to see how frustrated I am. Think of it. A man who was 29 asking the question of when will we have a good government is today asking it. It's terrible. So the message of this Democracy Day, it's not a happy one. Look at all the period gone. You see this thing called 70. You say 71. Plus 9 is what?
That's 80.
Because I disagree when my grandkids say, Grandpa, don't call me Grandpa. I'm a young man. The truth is, at 80, I'm an old man. So are you telling me that I've wasted my life? So I'm considering the possibility of, is there an alternative, conceptually? So it's a challenging question. But if you are my wife and you don't give me food, Monday, Tuesday, for 2 years, I'm going to ask myself, why am I married? Don't I look for a girlfriend and kick this one out?
But that's your generation. It's changing now.
Well, I don't know about that. I'm using it as an example, as an analogy of, let us accept. I'm not even talking about President Tinubu. Along the line, from the time of democracy till today, the story has been an unhappy one. It's not been a happy story. Because if you want to know the measure of unhappiness, it's not me you should be talking to actually on this Democracy Day. You should be in Ajegunle with the mic and ask him, how do you feel? Then you get the real barometer. But because I've had a deep connection with people, so I'm able to, that from time to time, the National Bureau of Statistics will release a result. I use it as toilet paper. Because I want to know the state of Nigeria's economy. When my driver comes to work on Monday, I ask him, give me the report. Not the one coming from the National Bureau. Because it's all painted. Statistically, Nigeria grew by 2.something%. And so rice is going up. Rice is going up. So until the price of rice drops, diesel comes down, petrol comes down, gari, electricity, then I can say, yes, there is something. So people feel discontent. I don't think that I need to go and start asking, are you discontent? But I feel it. I feel the discontent. So I thought this is a point to make on Democracy Day, because people say, happy Democracy Day. Ain't nothing happy about it. That's the truth. Ain't nothing happy about it. It's a day to reflect and say, how do we get mature leaders? So we're watching President Tinubu. He's made some good statements, some not so good. So if you plateau his score, maybe just about a bit above average, but I can point to some people in his government for praise.
All right. So I think on the final note, what's the hope for the next 1 year? I mean, how can we as Nigerians hold our government accountable?
We can't. We're too poor. We can't. So it's saying that my grandchild of 4 years can hold me accountable. I'm the one to define what is good for her. So that's another challenge. Rishi Sunak's Conservative Party have been in office for an unbroken period of 13 years. Everybody is fed up. That's accountability. So when the government here hasn't done well, can you and I vote them out? Can't, because our votes don't count. So we're at the mercy of these people. So the message I'd like to pass to President Tinubu is, you've got some things right. Some things you need to, but the first thing to do is to make sure that your performance index, the KPI that you set, that I now see ministers on TV giving reports, anyone that fails, show him the door, so that there will be a strong public perception that not performing will have consequences. You'll see the change. I'll give you an example. Very foolish example, but I always like to use foolish personal examples. So in my country house in Onitsha, I discovered that the staff had appropriated my time and money to themselves. So I told my executive assistant, we will teach them a lesson. No more salary. For the first time, Victoria began to call, so now you know I'm there. Consequence! Then every day, the one who is the housekeeper, who goes to Pentecostal churches, I'm not saying Pentecostal church is bad, but leaves her work where she's paid and disappears. I said, okay, since you're not a Pentecostal pastor, I won't pay you. She's now there every minute reporting to my executive assistant. What's the message in this? You punish those who don't perform. Look at the minister, Betty, whatever her name is. Took away 500 million, allegedly. Nothing. So why won't I take my own? Why won't I? There has to be a strong perception that misbehavior will be severely punished. When that perception is there, we will have confidence in the government. When the government announces palliatives, we say, the money is coming, we're waiting. But if look at the last minister of aviation, wow. You should see his palatial thing in Casino. So it's a good thing he's going through this trial, and I hope it ends in a conviction. So my last point would be, government can only be good if those who perform do it on our behalf, not on their behalf. When they put the money in their pocket and there's no consequence.
Well, Tinubu first administration is low. I pass out as low because we cannot eat for 3 times a day.
I must tell you that the 1 year of Tinubu in office, for me, is a wasted year. It's a wasted year because it has dashed the expectation of Nigerians. It has dashed the hope of Nigerians. Let us just look at the double policy that came from the president during inauguration. I'm talking about the subsidy removal on gasoline and the floating of Naira at the official window. Though the floating of Naira at the official window did not come immediately, but these are the 2 major policies of this government that have seen Nigeria economy collapsing. And it's quite unfortunate that the government have made so many promises that we feel would have changed things for the better, but unfortunately, the government have not been able to redeem any of its promises.
Most of the money, we saw that ever since the president assumed office, he bought vehicles for the national assemblies. Then also Nigerians have not felt any impact of the federal government. The same President Tinubu told us that see, if the first assembly is gone, there will be federal bus transit that will be stationed in every nooks and crannies, strategic locations that will convey commuters to their different locations at a subsidized rate. Till date, I am still yet to see with my 2 eyes the federal mass transit.
Everything is expensive now. Before, a bag of flour used to be 7,000, 8,000, but now it's 58,000. Sugar, the same thing. We cannot even eat bread now. Bread we used to buy before 700, now is 1,700 naira. The one of 100 naira is now 700 naira. Transportation is very, very high. Bag of rice and it's no-go area. Beans, onions, everything. If you want to go and buy meat now, they'll give you 3 pieces for 1,000 naira. So for the past 2 years now that Tinubu have been in power, I've not eaten meat. It's crayfish we used to cook. So it's very, very bad. Both house strength, both NEPA bill, both transportation, everything is affecting, everything.
I've been here for good 10 years now. Before, this bottle of groundnuts is 900. We bought it 900, I will sell it 1,000 naira before. So now it's 1,716. Before, this my popcorn. The bag is 9,000 naira. Now it's 54, 60, and it's foreign one, it's not Nigeria corn. So you affect me. To even eat 3 times in a day now is too hard now.
Welcome back. Interesting conversations we've had there with PDP chieftain Bode George, as well as former NBA chairman and a lawyer, Olisa Agbakoba. Very interesting conversations we've had. We've looked at the opposition party's position regarding the past 365 days in office, as well as the judiciary's role in all of this. We're still going to be looking more into the past 1 year in office, and we're joined by social commentator and analyst, Ayo Adio. Good morning. Good to have you here.
Good morning.
Happy 1 year. I don't even know how to couch this greeting.
Happy inauguration.
Happy inauguration anniversary.
Same to you.
All right. We'll be looking at 1 or 2 papers to see what the front pages are saying this morning and see if there are any headlines that point to what exactly it is we're doing. The Vanguard newspaper this morning, the big story says, strike looms as minimum wage talks end in deadlock again. And that's the only paper we're going to be reviewing this morning. The big story says strike looms, and it's not looking good. The writer there says federal government OPS add 3,000 naira to earlier offer. Labour challenges government to break down offer. Nationwide strike appears inevitable in June. Organized labor's demand may endanger job security, according to OPS. Federal government now has enough to clear debts, according to Wale Edun. Biafra Day, IPOB insists on May 30 sit at home in the southeast. 2026 WCQ, Osimhen out of South Africa Benin Games. And then at the top of the paper, we have 6 things Tinubu must do to succeed, according to article. I like the opposition. They are really speaking up very strongly. Kano Emirates tussle. Courts give conflicting orders on Sanusi's removal. And the final story there, 365 days on, Tinubu's bitter sweet run. Okay. So I think we'll come back to the conversation about the past 365 days. But I think it all sort of, it's woven, it's interwoven. They sort of intermarry. The NLC, the TUC, there have been conversations with the government regarding the minimum wage, and now we're seeing that they've come to a deadlock. They started off with a figure that many refer to as not logical, because not necessarily because labor doesn't deserve that or Nigerian workers don't deserve that, but we're looking at what the government can afford, logically. So there's been back and forth, and now we're at a deadlock.
Well, unsurprisingly so, because you have to look at it from a broad perspective. First, the average Nigerian worker earns the least in the world, only better than Bangladesh. So we have essentially the poorest workers in the entire world, and that doesn't speak so well for our country, given the size of our economy and the size of our GDP. So to that extent, you would argue that the labor unions have a point, saying that they want better wages, essentially to take wages away from the floor. On the flip side of it, obviously, is the fact that the amounts that the labor unions are demanding, over 610,000, now reviewed to 400, I think, 80,000 naira, is a bit unrealistic. And the reason simply is, if you push that economy, if you pay that amount to workers across the country, you're going to push forward inflation. And the reality is, many states cannot afford to pay that amount. Just last week, Zamfara were celebrating the fact that their governor decided to pay 30,000 naira minimum wage. So it's still a big party that governors are willing to pay 30,000 naira a month. And now you want to raise that ceiling to about 480. It's a bit, the labor unions are a bit guilty of living in the clouds, if you'd like. So I think there has to be a realistic and pragmatic approach to dealing with these wage issues. I understand that inflation is high, but a more realistic number would be between 70,000 to 90,000 naira.
When you're talking about realistic, are you talking about what the average Nigerian, requires to exist for a month? Are you talking about what a living wage, what figures a living wage should be, or you're talking about what is possible for the Nigerian government to pay?
Well, I'm looking at all of them put together. Now, again, let me be very honest. The Nigerian government are not helping themselves in this argument, because one of the reasons why the labor unions are a bit stubborn is the fact that you can't tell me that it's impossible to pay a living wage and you're riding the latest SUVs. You can't tell me that you can't afford to pay me a certain amount of money and you're flying first class in private jets. Now, I'm not sure there are any elite class in the world. If you looked at social media and you saw a typical gathering of politicians, or when one politician is going to visit another politician, what you see first are a show of SUVs. What you see are opulence, people showing how much they have arrived. You see them arriving from the airport from a private jet, and you see them with the latest SUV, exchanging pleasantries. So there's this flagrant display of wealth that, betrays a lack of sensitivity of what the average Nigerian is going through. And you cannot be negotiating from that point of view and expect the labor unions to have the short end of the stick, which is why I've always argued that our politicians must commit class suicide. You can't continue to be the highest end politicians in the world, and your country essentially is living in abject poverty. We essentially are a factory for manufacturing poor people in the world. Nigeria has arguably the highest amount of poor people per capita in the entire world. It makes absolutely no sense. Unemployment is high, poverty is continuing to rise, there's no end in sight, and politicians continue to live such extravagant, their appetite is just unending.
Whatever happened to the Oransari report? There was a lot of clown and excitement about it when, the government did say that it should be implemented, set up a committee to ensure implementation within 12 weeks. I don't know that we have as much.
There's obviously a difference between policy articulation and the intention to pursue a policy and the reality on ground. Obviously, there's been a lot of policy pronouncement, but it's hardly been followed, by activities, the pragmatism, the strategic discipline necessary to drive these policies to fruition. we really haven't seen that. So you've had a lot of policy somersaults, you've had a lot of inconsistency, and worse off, it's like you have a lot of ministries working at cross purposes, and they are not achieving, any desired results, such that 1 year into office, there's still a lot of promises and very little results to show for the level of investments that have gone in the last 1 year. And that really worries me. It's just like a university student who starts his academic year. If you miss your year one and you're aiming to make first class, it becomes almost impossible, right? And that's where we are now. If you've not made the most out of the first year in office, you put yourself in a very difficult position, because you know that the fourth year is usually for politicking, and it's a completely wasted year. And essentially, you just have 2 years.
Actually, from the third year.
Exactly. So you have a lot of political permutation. So for me, the first year is usually the year you lay that foundation, you set the tone, you set the direction, you mobilize support, and you steer the country in the direction with which you want it to go. Unfortunately, it's still topsy-turvy. We're still playing Russian roulette, if you like, and we're not making real progress.
But there's people who, have had their own analysis on ministers, and how to rate them. You've rated some Wike, the minister of the FCT, really high. Rated the Minister of Works, Dave Umahi, and a couple of other people, like exactly Tunjojo, and what's the other guy's name? Can't remember.
You're struggling to even name 5 out of 40 plus ministers.
But that's mostly. I mean, Ali Pate did, share a couple of things that they achieved with health. He pointed out, some funding that has now been released. A couple of, some figures with regards to primary health care, accessibility and all of that, how they've also recruited more people to join the healthcare workforce, to tackle, Jagba, and those who have the brain drain. Those were some of the things that they pointed out. So I'm sure that every Nigerian would also struggle to name, these ministries, and, because a lot of them are irrelevant, in the every Nigerian life. Do you agree with the ratings? Yes, some Wike, Dave Umahi, and Olabumi Tunjojo and a few others. So the Minister of Power, Jelabu, will be on the bottom.
So I don't think you can look at these ministries in isolation. I mean, if you're talking about behind the scenes, when the president wants to have a handshake with his best performing ministers, then you can do that. But they have to work as a collective for you to judge the progress of the administration. And while you have pointed out 3 or 4 ministers who seem to be moving the needle a bit, collectively they have been underwhelming. And that really is the problem. And, I have always argued that you don't have state capacity to do too many things at the same time, right? And you don't have enough resources to effectively change a lot of fundamentals across the various sectors of the economy. And I have argued consistently that the government needs to have a clear focus on what the state is going to intervene in and leave what the private sector is going to do in the other aspects. And so for me, if the state can focus strategically on agriculture, driving productivity, dealing with food security, and of course, focus on dealing with national security issues, and perhaps a few other macroeconomic fundamentals, then we're likely to make a lot more progress. But we seem to be trying to do too many things at the same time and making very little movement at the end of the day. And you see, the most fair and balanced way to judge this administration is to judge them by the promises that they made to the Nigerian people and by the commitments that they have made for themselves and the goals and objectives that they have set in place. And I give you 3 examples. Their documents clearly said that they wanted to grow the economy by an average of 8 to 10% consistently over 4 years, right? You're growing your GDP now at less than 3%. So on that scorecard, you have failed to meet the mark.
I mean, even if you laid out the 8-point agenda, there's none of them that you can actually even give a pass on.
So that's what I'm saying. You have to judge them by that agenda. And if you put the metrics and you put out their scorecard, you will see that the only thing that they have done significantly based on the promises that they made was that, yes, they were going to reform the oil and gas sector. They obviously said they were going to push bold reforms in terms of monetary policy. They have removed petrol subsidies. They have done these things. But the truth
Even though that is still debatable.
Yes, of course, we have argued that the sequencing of those policies have probably hurt us more than it has benefited us. But at the end of the day, you have to judge them by the promises that they made.
And I just want you to quickly, because we're going to go back to our, NIJ students here. So I want you to just quickly score 0 to 10. Food security.
I mean, the number speaks for itself. 40% inflation, not working for me.
So
it is what it is.
No, give a mark.
It's bad. I mean, I would say 2 because people are extremely hungry.
Poverty eradication.
Of course, 2.
Economic growth and job creation.
Exactly.
Job creation, 2. Economic growth, 5. Because again, you can see that the numbers are slightly moving in a positive direction. Yeah.
Okay, access to capital.
I mean, extremely poor because interest rates have gone high, which has made capital more expensive and stifling manufacturing, construction, and small businesses. So that's really, really poor, given the fact that...
And rule of law and fighting corruption.
Absolutely abysmal, and especially the rule of law. And that worries me the most because we now live in a country where it looks like judicial decisions are things that you can acquire as though you were going to a shopping mall, right?
Yeah.
And the case of Kanu, buttresses this point where there's clear judicial precedents where, state governments are squarely responsible for chieftaincy matters, and you have conflicting judgments from the Federal High Court.
And the state court.
I mean, it's in many cases, even with the way Godwin Emefiele's case was handled, how he was held before he was brought before a court of committed jurisdiction, held for days, even though there's a constitutional provision for how you should do a lot of that. I mean, these are conversations that are unending. I'm sure that we'll revisit these conversations over and over again until the 12th of June is when we have the official Democracy Day. But Ayo Adio, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you so much.
All right.
I just wanted to mention that the great part is, when a child fails in school, you normally would repeat.
But they cannot repeat. Well,
this will give you accelerated promotion.
Speaking of a child.
So with your ratings, would you like that they repeat in 2027?
Well, don't make me make political statements here, right?
Or the ministers too.
Let the Nigerian people be the judge.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us, Ayo Adio. Thank you for joining us, the students from Nigerian Institute of Journalism. It's a pleasure to have you. We're going to have one of you wrap up the show. But I felt like there's been a bit of doom and gloom in some pockets, and I want to spread a bit of sunshine. So can you allow me to do that in 30 seconds? Okay, I have just found out that I'm going to be an auntie again, as my sister has just delivered a baby boy on what was Democracy Day. So congratulations to my sister.
Should be named Tinubu.
What?
A baby should be named...
No, we're not Yoruba,
Bola or Ahmed.
No, he's not a Yoruba baby, so he cannot be named
Jagaban?
Any of that. But I want to say congratulations to my sister and to her husband and to her family, and welcome, Jeremy. You are going to have the best auntie ever. Congratulations. So thank you very much. With a round of applause for my new nephew. We're about to leave the show, Osaugi. I don't know why you're just... I don't understand what your goal is.
So you can name the child inauguration?
Why you have your own child? Name your child's 8-point agenda. As we wrap up the show, I'd like to give our students from the Nigerian Institute of Journalism the opportunity to wrap up the show for us here. We'll be back again tomorrow, but let them do the honors. All right, over to you.
So from us, students of Nigerian Institute of Journalism, and these wonderful people in the studio, it's bye for now. See you tomorrow.
Woo! All right, see you tomorrow. See you bright and early. We have Jasiri coming up next.